Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. This is Dr. Danny, physician astrologer. Today, we are going to explore the concepts of embodiment and intimacy through the astrological houses of the second and the eighth house. We will also do an example by analyzing my astrological chart and looking at the planetary rulers of these houses. This has been such an incredible and spooky, accurate process for me. So I'm excited to finish this journey. This is the last video in the series of 6, and you can find all the other houses and their axes under the playlist that I'll link below in the description. So I don't really have any announcements. We'll just go ahead and get right into it. I'll share my screen and we will talk about this. All right, friends, I'm calling this the sacred exchange. Because when we think about the second and the eighth houses in our astrological charts, we're dealing with the energy of the concrete, and then we're dealing with just energy. So, in order to exchange, in order to merge, in order to validate worth, in order to have intimacy, we have to have the second house. And in order to have stuff, we have to have the eighth house. So, this more than any other axis, I think, goes together because there's a motion, there's a toroidal field, basically a flow between the two of them that's quite interesting when you analyze it. So let's look at the sacred exchange between the second and the eighth house. So at the end of this teaching, you'll be able to define the concept of embodiment. You will also be able to define the concept of intimacy. We will examine both in the context of the second and the eighth houses. We will locate and read the second and eighth house rulers. Just some quick acknowledgments. We are 46 strong stargazers, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much, beautiful souls, for signing up for a membership with my channel. I just want to shout out and appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So let's just settle into this teaching. The graphic behind the words here really embodies that exchange. There is an as above, there's a so below, there's a so within, there's a so without, there's a second house, there's an eighth house. And Sri Aurobindo said it succinctly when he said, to be able to receive, you must open yourself. To be able to give, you must possess yourself. So let's get into the concept of embodiment. What is embodiment? Well, embodiment is the soul choosing to be fully present in its form. So many of us are unfamiliar with that. We feel very disconnected being in physical form, right? So embodiment means being fully present. It is the remembrance that the body is not a prison, but a temple. So we are here by choice. We've chosen to come here. We've chosen to forget. And then we've chosen to feel trapped. So we know what that freedom is truly like. And the second house is where value becomes sensation and spirit becomes substance. So embodiment is the practice of living inside your worth instead of chasing it. It is literally believing that you are worth more than money. And that's when money chases you. True embodiment is the courage to inhabit your life with permission and with pleasure. So more than any other house of your chart, where the fifth house is your pleasure, the eighth and the second house is how it's received and embodied. Why do we study embodiment? Well, it's a big part of who we are as a spirit, mind, body complex. Without embodiment, there is no time. There's no here, there's no now, and there's no intimacy with the phenomenon we call life. Worth can't just be a concept. It must be experienced through the senses. Yes, when I do this, it feels good. When I express myself this way, it feels this way. Embodiment anchors intuition into the body where truth can be felt rather than imagined. So, friends, when we embody, we become grounded enough to receive, to hold, to nourish ourselves without taking too much, without taking too little. Embodiment is what allows the soul to trust incarnation as a sacred rite of passage. How embodiment works. So when we look at our astrological second house, it teaches us to build stability, cultivate resources, and honor the physical self and other physical entities. Planets here reveal how you inhabit your body and the value of your existence. The ruler of the second house shows you where you must claim ownership of your life. Embodiment grows through attention, care, and devotion to the self. As we develop anchoring and self-worth, life begins to respond in kind. So the moment we value ourselves more than money, so to speak, as an example, then the more the field begins to respond to you. It begins to almost tempt you with the excesses that you once desired and chased. So how do we tie the second house to embodiment? Well, each planet in the second house learns to value itself through the body and through presence. The sun here, for example, shines through self-possession and inner authority. The moon in the second house feeds the body with comfort, memory, and emotional nourishment. Venus awakens sensuality and the desire to receive beauty and love. Mars here builds confidence through grounded action and survival intuition. So you want to note the sign that is on your second house and any planets within your second house, and that will begin to tell you the story of your embodiment. You want to look at the ruler of the second house, and I'll show you guys how to do that shortly. But whichever constellation spans your second house, the ruler of that constellation is also the ruler of your second house. And it reveals your worth language. It shows where you develop security, trust, and self-possession. Its aspects reveal your inner narrative of value and deserving. So, for example, in my second house, Gemini spans the second house. So the ruler of my second house is Mercury because Mercury rules Gemini. So then I look to where Mercury lives in my chart, Cancer, second house, because the cusp of my third house is also in Cancer, but Gemini, well, you'll see in my chart. But so I look to Mercury and I look at its aspects and I look at rules Mercury, and then I can even look to Mercury's second house to see how my significator of embodiment embodies. So follow the ruler's story across your chart. It will reveal the frequency through which your soul learns to say, I deserve to exist fully. Let's go on to intimacy before we look at a chart, just so you have these two concepts as the foundation of the reading. Intimacy is the surrender of guardedness into sacred exchange. It is the willingness to merge energy, resources, power, and truth. And our eighth house in astrology is where vulnerability becomes transformation. Intimacy strips away illusions of control and invites the soul into an energy of depth. So true intimacy is the courage to be seen beyond the mask and be loved anyway. What's the purpose of intimacy? Why do we even have to do it? It's so uncomfortable, right? Without intimacy, there is no evolution, only survival. Deep connection to another soul reveals the parts of ourselves we cannot meet alone. So trust and surrender allow energy to move instead of to stagnate. Intimacy teaches us that real power does not dominate. It merges and transforms. So when we surrender into shared experience, we discover our capacity to resurrect. So how does intimacy work? Well, when we look at our eighth house, it governs the shared resources, the soul bonds, and the deep emotional truths. Any planet in your eighth house reveals how you merge, trust, release, and regenerate. The ruler of the eighth house, if you don't have any planets in your eighth house like me, you take the ruler of the eighth house because that shows you where your soul seeks depth and shared transformation. Intimacy grows through vulnerability, shared truth, and energetic exchange. And so as we develop trust and surrender, we unlock our deepest power. That's why intimacy is so important. That's why connecting to another on the deepest of levels is so valuable. So each planet in our eighth house becomes a gateway to rebirth. So, for example, if you were born with the sun in your eighth house, your ego is purified through alchemy and truth. The moon in your eighth house transforms emotional attachments into devotion and depth. Venus here, wow, merges love with power and teaches receptive surrender. Mars here learns to act from trust rather than control or fear. So if you don't have any planets in your eighth house or your second house, you look at the ruler of that house. So the ruler of the eighth house, my Sagittarius is in my eighth house. So Jupiter rules my eighth house. So we look at the sign and the planets within the eighth house to get a better story of this intimacy energy. Now, the ruler of the eighth house will reveal your intimacy language, and it shows where you learn trust, vulnerability, and rebirth. Its aspects reveal your relationship with surrender and power exchange. So, to understand your intimacy path, you follow this ruler's initiations. It shows how your soul learns that letting go is not loss, but liberation. So presence is the embodiment energy, being in the here and now. I am not 2 hours ago, I'm not 2 hours from now. I'm right here and I'm right now. And then the power is in sharing that right now moment. So power is intimacy, presence is embodiment. So what do we do next? Well, like all the other videos before and in this final iteration, we will find the second and eighth houses in the natal chart. We will look at the sun, moon, and chart ruler. The chart ruler, by the way, is the ruler of the first house. Okay. See the houses of projection and reflection, the self you don't see, and then figure out what planet rules the house that you're questioning. Okay. So let's just review planetary rulers before we get into the chart. So if you haven't seen the other videos, I cover this in every one. Aries is ruled by Mars, Taurus is ruled by Venus, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, Cancer the moon, Leo the sun, Virgo by Mercury, although I like Venus, Libra by Venus. I like Mercury for Libra. I do have a dissertation on that as well. When Venus moved into Virgo, I discussed this in depth. So do check out the live stream on that. And then Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars, but many modern astrologers use Pluto. Ophiuchus is up for debate. Most of us use Chiron, but Mars can be used as the traditional ruler if you want to keep it within the normal Chaldean order. That is the one to use if you're using profections, or if you're using zodiacal release, you want Mars to rule Ophiuchus. Sometimes you can also put the other asteroids in there. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. Saturn rules Capricorn. Some people put Pluto in there. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn traditionally, but we have Uranus, so we put Uranus in Aquarius. And then Pisces was traditionally ruled by Jupiter, but now we give Neptune the rulership. So this is what it looks like on an actual chart. I took my birth chart and I put the traditional and modern or alternative rulers around the ring here, so you can see that. So like I said, I like to use Venus for Virgo and Mercury for Libra and Pluto for Scorpio, Chiron for Ophiuchus. And then if I'm doing any of the Hellenistic techniques, I will use Mars for this entire space. And then when I'm using those techniques, I also use the traditional rulers. But when I'm just interpreting, I use Neptune and Uranus as these rulers. So there's that. Let's get into the actual example of my second and eighth houses. So here is my second house, and it's packed. It's very busy. I have Mercury here in Cancer, and I have Venus in Gemini and Saturn in Gemini. Also, here is asteroid Lilith, and star Sirius is parallel. So star Sirius is like down here somewhere. So very packed second house. Because Gemini spans most of my second house, I give the rulership to the Gemini ruler, which is Mercury. And then over here in my eighth house, most of it is spanned by Sagittarius. So we give Jupiter my eighth house rulership. So, what's super neat about Jupiter in the eighth, if you're actually born with Jupiter in your eighth house, they say you will have a pleasant death. And so I smile when I see Jupiter ruling my eighth house because that is what I want. I want a pleasant death. So, at any rate, we have the second house. Um, Remember, this is the energy where we build a sense of worth, how we stabilize ourselves, and how we receive. It's the foundation of embodiment. It's the ability to feel safe in the body, to trust my value, and to generate the internal resources needed to move through life. So my worth is actually connected to communication, learning, and exchange, which is mostly, Mercury and Gemini's energy. I feel most grounded when I am thinking, speaking, and engaging mentally with others. Stillness alone does not resource me as deeply and as actively as curiosity and interaction do. So my value grows as I share ideas, ask questions, and connect through language. With Venus and Saturn and Lilith with Sirius there, my self-worth has a much more serious and disciplined tone. I can't be superficial when I talk. Like, I need truth, I need integrity and maturity in how I speak and how I create. Now, Mercury as the ruler, it's in Cancer. We're going to look at that in just a second. When we analyze Mercury's full energy, but let's look at the eighth house. Now, the eighth house, remember, is how we enter the deeper layer of connections with others, how we share power and resources, and how we transform. It's not just about merging with others or, letting resources flow. It's about learning where we actually hold on, where we surrender, and how we evolve through vulnerability. So you'll see in my eighth house, there's no planets here. It doesn't mean that there's no energy here. Basically, what it means is that I do not enter intimate spaces lightly or automatically. I merge through truth, belief, and shared vision, which is Sagittarius. I need honesty, philosophical alignment, and mutual growth in order to open. Emotional closeness isn't enough for me. I actually need intellectual and spiritual resonance to feel safe, to go deep, and to go vulnerable. So I'll be looking to Jupiter for guidance in my eighth house energy, and we will look at Jupiter shortly. So that's basically the energy of the second and the eighth house for me, how I embody and how I express intimacy. So that is how I am embody and how I express intimacy. I need to communicate. I need to think. I need to be questioning, working on something always. And the response, the way that I open and the way that I become vulnerable and don't feel the need to do that is when I am met with the same level of philosophical truth and belief and knowledge. Very, very interesting. Yeah, for me, arousal's through the mind. Like if you're smart, you can make me laugh, you can make me think. You have a better chance of quote unquote merging with me than you do just through physicality or money or other attributes. So that's very interesting. Very, very interesting. So let's look at these rulers, and so we give these rulers names, the significator of embodiment. So that would be the second house energy, and then Jupiter would be the significator of intimacy. So these significator energies, Mercury can play many roles for me, but in this particular analysis, it plays a significator of embodiment. And then it's also the significator of my karma, interestingly enough. So I must, it's almost like I must be probing and learning and asking questions and trying to understand. It's so incredible how accurate this is. So when we talk about the ruler of my embodiment, we are talking about Mercury in Cancer. So what this suggests is that my voice carries an emotional intelligence, right? So we have the emotions of Cancer, we have the intelligence of Mercury. My thought process is deeply intuitive and nourished by feeling, care, and memory. When I speak from my emotions and from lived experience, I feel supported, resourced, and very powerful. Communication is not just a skill for me, it is actually nourishment. So I must speak, I must communicate. And so for my chart, the second house teaches me that my worth is activated through honest communication, emotional intelligence, and meaningful exchange. I am also an extreme negotiator when it comes to business too. Like I will negotiate an extremely fair and balanced deal. I build stability by staying mentally engaged, speaking clearly, and treating my voice and ideas as real assets. So you see how all of this aligns with literally what I do every day in terms of how it's presented and what it means to me, how I embody in this world as a physical human being. And so let's since the eighth house was empty and it's mostly about having truth and philosophy and deeper meaning reflected back to me through my actions and what I value, let's see what Jupiter has to say about it. So my Jupiter is retrograde, and that means that my power must be reclaimed internally before I can express it externally or even share it externally. I am meant to grow from the inside out, and I transform the most when I reflect, revise old belief systems, and trust my own guidance before seeking validation outside myself. This placement squares my nodes, you see? So this adds karmic pressure to grow in how I relate and exchange energy. I can't avoid my relational evolution. It's built into my destiny. And because Jupiter trines my second house planets, my personal values and my ability to enter deep connection are actually linked and in a very nice way. So when I know my worth, I can share my power. When I try to merge without it, I feel imbalanced. I feel off kilter. That's that square to the nodes. So for me, the eighth house isn't about losing myself in others. It's about expanding through shared truth, shared vision, and shared awakening. My intimacy thrives where there's integrity, purpose, and mutual evolution. Amazing. This is so true for me, and then Mercury being in this T square between, my 11th house axis. We talked about this when we talked about the fifth and the 11th, the spark that starts the fire. And for me, this is about coming out as my individual self and overcoming the wounds of being banished by that collective that would receive my individual energy through creative expression. And Mercury stands at the bridge between these two, right? It balances that spark and my radiance and my resonance, while at the same time being the place where I park my value. And so when I can speak, when I can communicate, when I can teach, when I can learn, that provides the boost that my Jupiter needs to help me merge, to help me share my power, to help me share my knowledge and wisdom. And the eighth house just reflects the philosophical, the deep wisdom, and the gnosis back to me. So that's very, very interesting. All right. So we'll do the advanced technique on this, just like we've done with all the other house videos. We'll find the rulers of the second and the eighth house, and then we will analyze the second and the eighth house of those planets. This is where it can get really spooky sometimes. So, for example, we'll just get right into it. We have our rulers. So we'll take Mercury first. And Mercury, being in my second house, has a house that is 2 houses away from it and has a house that is 8 houses away from it. So, how does my significator of embodiment embody and be intimate? How does that work for Mercury? What is Mercury's axis here? So, because Mercury's second house, because my second house is in Gemini, Mercury is the significator of my self worth and my embodied resources. Mercury sits in Cancer, and the second house from Mercury is my natal third house, which means my sense of worth is built through my voice, okay? Through communicating and emotional intelligence. That's exactly how it's done. Now, my son is here, expressing in this space my identity, and it supports the way I build security. So when I share what I know and I speak from my heart, I feel resourced and aligned. I also will ground myself through learning, talking, teaching, and connecting ideas. But this isn't just like intellectual playtime for me. This is tied to feeling and intuition, meaning that I will strengthen my value when I speak from lived experience and emotional honesty. So there's that. There's Mercury's second house. That's a Cancer and Mercury with the sun 2 houses away from it. Now, Mercury's eighth house up here has the moon and black moon Lilith in Capricorn. This shows me that my thinking and communication transform through maturity, self-discipline, and emotional honesty. There needs to be a willingness to confront the deeper truths. My mind will evolve when I integrate my emotions instead of separating from them. I gain depth and power in my communication when I speak truths that once felt difficult or forbidden. When I bring my emotional experience into my wisdom and my teaching. So my voice becomes more authoritative and authentic the more I allow myself to feel, to process, and then to articulate those feelings in a grounded and responsible way. Okay, so Mercury, I share the resource of my voice through the energy of touching things that were taboo, forbidden, or hidden. That's amazing. We're talking about real sky astrology. So now we're going to look at Jupiter. Jupiter, my ruler, my significator of intimacy, the big, expanded, boisterous, abundant, prosperous Jupiter. How does my Jupiter build resources? Well, Jupiter's second 2 houses, its second house is my natal 11th house with Chiron. So once again, activating that second and 11th house. So Mercury, the ruler of my second house, activates my 5th and 11th through its planetary relationship. And then the rulership relationship of Jupiter to my 8th house connects my 5th and 11th house again. So radiating, we have to go back to the radiating resonance presentation to get a better idea of what this axis means natally. But to have, let me read to you what I have here. So we look to the second house from Jupiter to build strength and resources for intimacy. This is about community resonance, collective frequency, and belonging. So Pisces and Chiron here show that Jupiter, and therefore my path to intimacy, is nourished by spiritual connection, mystical awareness, soul community, and healing through a shared experience. So I will grow and feel resourced when I'm connected to people who understand my spiritual nature and support my vision. Community is not an optional thing for me either. When I'm surrounded by aligned frequencies, my sense of power and trust expands. Chiron will add a layer of vulnerability and healing. Part of my soul's work is to find communities where I do not have to hide who I am and where my sensitivity is a strength rather than a wound. And so when I find resonance, I actually thrive. Now, how does my significator of intimacy get intimate? Through creation, through the act of creation. And so that's my natal 5th house, the 8th house from Jupiter. It shows where Jupiter undergoes deep transformation. My 5th house in Virgo contains Pluto and Uranus, which means my intimate evolution happens through creativity, through self-expression, risk-taking, and personal authority. I transform through creation, especially when I allow myself to be bold, spontaneous, and fully expressed. So there's an intensity and an innovation in how I create and how I love. My intimacy path requires me to bring my full creative power forward without shrinking. When I let myself play, innovate, take creative risks, and express what feels true rather than what feels safe, I unlock deep healing and expansion. In other words, my intimacy deepens when I let myself be seen as a creator and not just a teacher or a guide. So, wow, that's pretty powerful. And it's so incredibly aligned to what I feel with my chart and how I move through the world. So the key points of this analysis is that presence reveals our capacity to root into self-worth, stability, and embodied value. Power, intimacy, it reveals our capacity to merge, transform, and hold depth without losing the self. The second house shows how we cultivate inner resources, self trust, and grounded receiving. And the eighth house shows how we enter intimacy, shared vulnerability, and energetic exchange. Every act of healthy receiving strengthens our ability to share without fear, and every surrender into connection deepens our sovereignty. So that's it, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for going through this 6-part series of the journey through the houses. What a wonderful experience. I may actually offer someone a journey like this as a reading and see if we could do that. It might be kind of a long journey, but maybe if there was less teaching and more just chart analysis, we could do that. So stay tuned for that. That might be something that I offer so that I can take you guys through this journey as well. So I appreciate you all for coming along. I don't know what the next project's going to be, but I'm pretty sure it's right around the corner. So once again, I appreciate you all for listening. Take care, and I'll see you on the next one.